Disclaimer: this content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. My name is Lena. I'm 34 years old, and for the past few months, I've been carrying this quiet ache inside me, like a secret that won't stop whispering in my ear. I haven't told anyone, not even Jake. Maybe I'm scared of what admitting it means. Or maybe I just don't want to face it myself. It started on an ordinary Tuesday, the kind where everything feels heavy and routine, but even then, I knew something was slipping away. I was fixing the electricity in Mrs. Harrow's apartment. She's a widow, late 70s, the kind of woman who still leaves a little light on at night because the darkness feels too big to face alone. When she asked me to come into the room with her, I didn't think twice. It was nothing unusual for her to want company. I remember the softness of her voice and the faint smell of lavender that seemed to wrap the room in a fragile kind of calm. It's ironic, really, because I wished I could hold on to that feeling when I got home. Jake and we used to be a storm. Our relationship was this wild, beautiful mess. When we met, everything was electric. His hands on my skin made me dizzy, his laughter felt like a secret code only I could understand. There was safety in that storm, too. A comfort that, no matter what happened, we were tethered together by something fierce and unshakable. I remember how he used to pull me close at night, bury his face in my hair, and whisper promises that felt like the only truth in the world. But slowly, so slowly I barely noticed, the storm started to quiet. The kisses became polite, almost mechanical, like we were going through the motions because we were supposed to. I catch myself thinking back to a morning last winter. We were lying in bed, tangled in blankets, and he reached for me. I leaned in, expecting that spark I was desperate for, but instead, it was lukewarm, distracted. His hand rested on my waist without urgency. Our eyes met, and I could see the distance there, like he was miles away even though he was right beside me. I tried to tell myself that love changes, that this is normal, but it feels like losing my own skin. The warmth that used to flow between us has turned into this cold, heavy silence. We cuddle sometimes, but it feels more like a demand than a comfort. Like I'm trying to patch something that's tearing apart and he's too tired to hold on. I remember once, after a long day, I reached out to him while we watched a movie. I wrapped my arms around him, hoping to feel something real, and he barely shifted. It wasn't rejection, exactly. It was worse, a withdrawal, a closing off, like I was becoming a stranger in the life we built. And that's when I realized. The exact moment it hit me like a wave crashing over a fragile shore. It was a Saturday night. Jake was supposed to come home early, but he was late again. When he finally walked in, I was standing by the window, the city lights blinking around me like distant promises. He didn't apologize, didn't explain. Instead, he dropped his keys on the table and walked past me without a word. I reached out, almost without thinking, but he didn't look back. That night, lying in our bed, I stared at the ceiling, tracing the cracks like they were clues to something I couldn't fix. The emptiness beside me was overwhelming, not just the physical space, but the way I could feel him slipping away, piece by piece. And here I am, still holding on to the hope that one day, I'll find the courage to say what I really feel. But for now, this story is mine to tell. Because sometimes, the hardest truths live in the quiet moments we try to forget. Jake is an architect. It fits him, precise, logical, with this way of seeing the world in lines and angles, like everything can be measured and planned. Maybe that's part of why he struggles with what I need most right now. I need to feel seen, to be understood on the inside, but he's trying to show love in ways that miss the mark. Last Thursday, we had one of those evenings that should have been simple. He came home early, which was rare, and without a word, he pulled me into the kitchen, where I was chopping vegetables for dinner. His hands were warm on my waist, sliding a little too forcefully, as if to remind me he was there, present, maybe even protective. But it felt like a gesture without meaning, a physical presence that only emphasized how far apart we'd grown. I froze for a second, the knife still in my hand, and I wanted to say something, that I wasn't ready for that kind of touch, that I needed him to slow down, to really see me before reaching for me like that. But the words caught in my throat. How do you explain that the hug you want isn't about the hug itself, but about the feeling behind it? That I'm craving connection that goes beyond skin and bones? He kissed my neck then, his lips soft but urgent. It should have been comforting, his way of showing affection, but all I felt was the growing distance between us. Like he was trying to rebuild a bridge without asking if the other side wanted to cross. Instead of pulling me closer, it pushed me further away. Later, when we finally sat down to eat, I tried to bring it up gently. Jake, can we just talk? I said, stirring my food more than I should have. I don't feel like you're really here with me sometimes. He looked up, confused. What do you mean? I'm here. I'm with you. No, I mean emotionally, I said, searching for the right words. It feels like you're trying to connect through touch, but I need more than that. I need you to listen, to be present with me, not just in the moment but in everything. He frowned, leaning back in his chair. I don't know what you want me to do, Lena. I'm not good with all those feelings. I show you I love you. Isn't that enough? And that was the moment I felt completely invisible, like no matter how much I tried to explain, my need for emotional intimacy was just too abstract, too complicated for him to grasp. His love was practical, hands-on, built on things he could control and fix. Mine was messy, raw, and rooted in a hunger for understanding. That night, as he reached for me again, I pulled away, unable to hide the frustration burning inside me. I'm not like you, Jake. I don't just need to be touched. I need to be known. He sighed, tired and defeated. I'm trying, Lena. Can't you see that? But trying felt empty without the feeling behind it. It was like building walls with no doors. I wanted to tell him that sometimes love isn't about the physical. That holding hands or kissing can't fill the space left by words unsaid and hearts unopened. But the words dissolved into silence, thick and heavy between us. It's strange how two people can live in the same house, share the same bed, and still feel miles apart. I crave connection, but I'm trapped behind this barrier of misunderstanding, and Jake's attempts at affection only remind me of what's missing. I'm tired of feeling like I'm asking for something he can't give. And yet, I keep hoping that one day, he'll see me again. Not just the body beside him, but the woman who's been waiting to be understood all along. That night, Jake came home later than usual, and I was sitting on the couch, the TV playing softly but my mind elsewhere, tangled up in all the things I couldn't say. He slipped in quietly, dropping his bag by the door. When he walked over, his face softened, and he reached out like he wanted to close the gap between us. He pulled me into a hug, his arms wrapping around me with that familiar weight I used to find comforting. But instead of melting into it, I stiffened. I flinched when his hand landed lightly but deliberately on my lower back. That little gesture that used to feel playful now felt intrusive, like a reminder of something missing. I could feel the disconnect in the press of his palms, but I couldn't force myself to lean in. He pulled back slightly, searching my eyes. Hey, are you okay? I nodded quickly, hoping he wouldn't press. Yeah. Just tired. He leaned down to kiss me, slow and soft. I wanted to want it. I wanted to feel that spark, that thread that used to tie us together. But instead, I felt hollow. The kiss was empty, mechanical. My lips barely moved against his, and I pulled away before it could go further. Jake's brows furrowed, a flicker of hurt crossing his face. Lena. I'm fine, I whispered, even though it wasn't true. My heart was pounding, not from desire but from frustration and confusion. I didn't want to push him away, but something inside me was closing off, like a door shutting quietly, but firmly. He sat beside me on the couch and reached for my hand, fingers warm and steady. But I hesitated before taking it, the simple touch feeling heavier than it should. I didn't pull away, but I didn't squeeze back either. It was just there. Like a placeholder for something I couldn't grasp. We sat in silence, the space between us charged and awkward. Finally, he said softly, "I don't know what to do anymore." "Neither do I admitted, my voice barely audible. "That's the truth, we're both lost, but maybe in different ways." I used to crave his touch, the way it made me feel alive and seen. Now, every move feels like a question I don't have the answer to. As the night stretched on, I caught myself overthinking every kiss, every touch, every look. Was it love? Was it obligation? Was it just a habit neither of us could break? And when he reached to pull me closer again, I closed my eyes and whispered to myself, "Why does everything have to turn into sex?" ChatGPT said, dinner was supposed to be a quiet moment between us. Just Jake and me, a simple meal I'd prepared, his favorite pasta with that sauce he liked, the one I'd learned to make almost perfectly over the years. The table was set with candles, flickering softly, casting shadows on the walls. I'd hoped the warmth of the room would thaw the coldness that had settled between us lately. But as soon as we sat down, the tension was thick enough to slice through. Jake barely touched his food, eyes darting to his phone every few seconds. I tried to start a conversation, something light, but his answers were clipped, distracted. "Are you okay?" I asked quietly, the question hanging between us like a fragile thread. He shrugged. "I'm fine." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe in us. But it was like trying to grasp smoke. As I reached for my glass of wine, my hands trembled slightly, frustration bubbling just beneath the surface. The silence grew unbearable, the space between us filled with everything we hadn't said. "Jake," I finally burst out, my voice cracking. "Why are you here if you're not really here? If you don't want me, not just my body but me, why do you keep pretending?" His fork clattered onto his plate, and he looked up at me, confusion and something sharper, maybe anger, flashing in his eyes. "What are you talking about, Lena?" I swallowed hard, the tears welling up suddenly, unbidden. "You don't see me anymore. You touch me like I'm just a thing, like I'm invisible. I'm not just some piece of furniture in your life, Jake. I'm the woman you promised to love, but I feel like I'm losing you every day." The words spilled out faster than I could control. I couldn't stop the sob that broke through my chest. The walls I'd built to protect myself crumbled all at once. Jake sat there, silent, staring at me like I'd become a stranger. His mouth opened, then closed again, and the quiet stretched even further. I wanted him to say something, anything. But his silence felt like a verdict. The ache inside me twisted into shame. How had it come to this? I'd imagined years of love, laughter, connection, not this chasm of loneliness and misunderstanding. After a few moments, I wiped my tears hastily, feeling ridiculous for losing control over something that felt so fragile already. "I'm sorry," I whispered, voice barely audible. "I didn't mean to. Jake stood up abruptly, grabbing his jacket. "Maybe we need some time." I nodded numbly, watching him leave, the door clicking shut behind him like a final punctuation to the night. Alone in the quiet apartment, I sank into the chair, feeling hollow. The fight, the tears, it all felt like a reckoning I'd been avoiding for too long. I thought back to Mrs. Harrow's gentle voice asking me to come into the room. That moment had been filled with warmth and quiet companionship. And here I was, feeling more alone than ever in my own home. What was supposed to be fixing the electricity had become a metaphor for my life, trying to repair something broken without really knowing how. Maybe the real fault lines weren't in the wiring at all. Maybe they ran deeper, through the heart of us both. And I didn't know if I had the strength to keep trying or if I needed to finally face the truth that love sometimes isn't enough. The day slipped past quietly, almost unbearably so. Our apartment felt less like home and more like a hollow shell of what it once was. Jake and I moved around each other with the awkwardness of strangers, the distance between us growing wider with every passing hour. I found myself watching him more than I spoke to him, noticing the small details I'd overlooked before, the way his shoulders slumped when he thought I wasn't looking, the tired lines etched deeper around his eyes, the way he'd stare out the window for long stretches without really seeing anything. He wasn't angry or cruel. He was just lost. Like me. Sometimes, I caught him in moments of quiet sadness, a heaviness that weighed on him just as much as it did on me. He wasn't a villain in this story, even if it felt like we were both failing each other. I realized how little I truly understood what he was going through. The pressure of his job, the silent battles I could only guess at, the exhaustion that made it hard for him to connect with me emotionally. And yet, despite all that, I missed him fiercely. I missed the way his laugh used to fill the room, how his touch could calm the storm inside me. I missed the warmth of being seen, really seen, by someone who knew my heart's edges, the good and the messy alike. But every time I reached out in my mind, I hit a wall. How do you reconnect when the language you speak no longer feels shared? How do you reach across the silence when it's filled with unspoken hurt and misunderstanding? There were nights I lay awake, turning over the memories of better times and wondering where the fault lines had opened. The guilt gnawed at me. Was I too demanding? Too impatient? Had I shut him out without meaning to? I wanted to believe we could still find our way back, but the fear of rejection held me frozen. One evening, I found him sitting on the couch, staring blankly at his phone. He looked up when I entered the room, his eyes tired but softer than they'd been in weeks. "Hey," I whispered, stepping closer. He nodded, offering a small, hesitant smile. "Hey." The space between us was thick with everything unsaid, but for a moment, it felt possible to cross it. "I don't know if we can fix this," I said honestly. "But I don't want to give up without trying." Jake looked down, then met my gaze again. "Me neither." It wasn't a promise or a solution. It was just a fragile beginning. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope. That night, after our quiet exchange in the living room, Jake didn't retreat to the bedroom like he usually did. Instead, he settled onto the couch, pulling a thin blanket over his knees. I watched him, the familiar rise and fall of his breathing soft in the dim light. It was the kind of vulnerable, unguarded moment that used to feel effortless between us. Now it felt fragile and new. I sat down beside him, hesitating, unsure if this was the space to bridge the distance that had grown between us. Without saying a word, I reached out and rested my hand lightly on his arm. He didn't pull away. The silence between us wasn't empty, it was heavy with everything we hadn't said, but also with the possibility of something still worth fighting for. "I don't want to lose us," I whispered, my voice barely louder than the soft hum of the city outside. Jake turned his head, meeting my eyes. There was no grand declaration, no dramatic promises, just a tired honesty that cut deeper than words. "Neither do I," he said, and it wasn't perfect, but it was real. We talked then, haltingly at first, peeling back layers of frustration and fear. We agreed on boundaries, to slow down, to listen without judgment, to ask before reaching out, because love, we realized, wasn't always about grand gestures. Sometimes, it was about showing up in the small ways, day after day. Later, when I finally went to bed, I found Jake asleep on the couch. The sight stirred something deep inside me, an ache mixed with hope. I gently kissed his forehead, the touch tender and reverent, a silent vow to try again. But even as we took these first steps toward healing, I knew the road ahead would be long and uncertain. Love wasn't a fairy tale with neat endings. It was messy, complicated, sometimes painful. And maybe that was enough. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to stand at a crossroads like this, where love isn't a given, where desire feels complicated and fragile, and where emotional intimacy isn't just about closeness, but about being truly seen. Looking back, I realize how much I carried without knowing it, the weight of unspoken needs, the silent longing for connection, and the quiet fear of being invisible in a room full of memories. Relationships aren't the fairy tale we're sold. They aren't just moments of passion or comfort. They're layers, layers of joy, frustration, hope, and heartbreak. They are the ongoing, sometimes exhausting work of peeling back those layers with someone else, hoping that person is willing to do the same. What I've learned is that desire isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a whisper, a glance, a touch, a moment of understanding that says, "I see you. I'm here." Jake and I, we didn't have all the answers. We stumbled and retreated, lost, and found ourselves in the cracks of a relationship that was changing. Maybe it was the distance between us, or maybe it was the distance inside me that I hadn't been brave enough to face. But I know this, love isn't just about holding on. Sometimes it's about knowing when to let go. Not because love failed, but because we're still learning how to love ourselves. I'm standing here now, not with all the pieces neatly in place, but with a clearer sense of who I am, and what I need. I'm learning that emotional intimacy is as vital as the air we breathe. It's not enough to touch without seeing, to speak without hearing, to love without understanding. And it's okay to want more, to want the kind of connection that makes you feel alive, even when it's messy or scary. Whether Jake stayed or walked away doesn't define my story. What matters is that I'm no longer afraid to face the quiet spaces in between, to listen to the ache and the hope, to honor my own voice when it trembles or breaks. If there's one thing I want you to take with you, it's this: love is not about perfection. It's not about seamless harmony or endless passion. It's about courage, the courage to be vulnerable, to demand tenderness, to wrestle with silence, and to choose yourself even when it's the hardest thing to do. Because in the end, the deepest kind of love begins with the person staring back at you in the mirror. And only when we truly see ourselves can we hope to be truly seen by another.